everyone. Today we're going to talk tariffs. We're going to talk the fun stuff. Don't worry, I'm going to make it fun, I'm going to make it entertaining, and I'm going to make it easy to understand. So when I do videos from this background, I talk about the business of fashion and beauty, the economics behind it. I've talked about things like the lipstick index or how the supply chain affects beauty and fashion, or where luxury is going. And today we're going to talk about tariffs. And to be honest, I thought a lot about doing this video before I did it. And I probably wouldn't be doing it, except for the fact that many of you have requested it, including my members and longtime subscribers. So I felt like I owed it to everyone to do it. Why? Well, if you don't know, I am an attorney. I joke, I'm a recovering lawyer, and I will always have my bar as long as I keep it current. But I was a lobbyist, and I was in advocacy, policy, whatever you'd like to call it, in Washington, D.C. for almost 30 years. And I worked on those issues actually recently, tariff issues in particular, and actually wrote a comment letter specifically on tariffs and what it would mean to a particular industry. I was not advocating on part of the beauty industry. It was actually a different industry, but it's the exact same issues. This just relates to beauty and fashion and not the issues that I was working on before, although those industries are going to be impacted as well. So let me break this down for you. A tariff. What is a tariff? Really, all a tariff is a tax. It's another way to say tax. It's like a duty. Duties, tariffs, taxes. What it really means is that a country, the United States, has determined that there are countries that we are in a trade deficit with, and we want to limit the amount of products that come in from those countries. And one way to do that is to say that you're going to charge them more for them to bring their goods here. So let's pick a country or region, the EU, for example, because the EU encompasses a whole bunch of countries. It has a 20% tariff. So when Italy, for example, which is in the EU, makes a Tom Ford eyeshadow, and it's $100. I'm using 100 because it's just easy math. And it comes into the United States, the price of the item is $100. And the country and company exporting that to the United States gets charged a 20% tariff, $20. The company, the export, there's lots of people that are part of the supply chain. I won't mess that. It gets really complicated really quickly. Can decide to do a lot of things at that point. They can change the price of the good. So now the eyeshadow quad is going to be $120 for everybody in the United States. They can choose to absorb the cost somehow and say, we're going to keep our costs at $100. And we're going to eat that $20 that we had to pay. They do that in a number of different ways when they absorb costs. The costs don't just go away. They still had to pay the $20, but they may cut back on marketing. They might not spend as much on marketing or advertising. They may decide to change the ingredients in a product. They may decide to change the packaging of a product because it will be cheaper. There's lots of things that companies can do to combat that cost. But most of the time, they pass the cost on to the consumer. That's what happens. So your costs go up. So when you are buying from a country if you're in the United States, and you're buying from a country that has these additional tariffs, which is practically everywhere in the world, according to this new tariff structure, there's only a few countries that are excluded, you will be paying more for your good. That is basically what is going to happen, more than likely. One of the reasons that a country would decide to do something like this, and we're not talking about this particular administration, we're just saying, why would an administration do this, is to, again, limit the amount of products that are coming in from another country, to encourage the country of origin, so let's say the United States, to move more of the manufacturing and creation to that country. So the argument would be, well, we want to have more manufacturing and more product development here in the United States. So we need to encourage the United States to make more and at better pricing. So we're going to make the other countries' products more expensive so people won't buy them. They'll buy American. That's the idea. This has come up before. If those of you who don't know, and I'll put a little link or description down below to link to it. I don't want to do it because I think it's a copyright infraction. Ferris Bueller's Day Off, the teacher who is a known economist, the one that says Bueller, he is talking about the 1930 tariff law that went into effect. Congress passed a law that it was the beginning of the Great Depression, and they thought by raising tariffs, they would create more financial prosperity for America. And what it actually ended up doing was plunging us all in the United States further into the Great Recession and Depression. And again, it is an economic discussion. And I am not an economist. I am an attorney. I am a political science major. I have studied these phenomena. And I do understand the economic thought process behind them, but I am not an economist. And it is just my personal opinion and expertise that leads me to believe that this will be very not only difficult, but possibly devastating for the fashion and beauty industry and for consumers in general. The argument that it will move manufacturing to the United States is an interesting one and should be discussed. LVMH, for example, has actually moved, I think, a third. I'm just making sure. Yeah, I have notes. Third factory in the US in 2019. It's one of the few actual manufacturing footprints in the United States for LVMH. And that accounts for about 50% of the product here in the US from LVMH. So 50% is not made here in the US. So again, we're talking specifically what's going to happen to the US. I'll have some notes on what's going to happen to other countries and how this affects the global economy as well. So just for LVMH, it's only half. The argument that it will encourage other companies to create more manufacturing here is, as I said, an interesting argument, but here are the things to consider when you make that argument. One, it takes investment, financial investment, and actual investment, as in you need land, you need time, you need builders, and then you need money to create these manufacturing footprints. It is not as simple as putting up a manufacturing plant. And many of the manufacturing plants that were in the United States, I'm in Massachusetts, there's a whole area, Fall River, that used to make like paper and textiles that is gone now. It's not, I mean, it doesn't exist anymore. You can't just start it back up. That's not how it works. It takes a great deal of time and a great deal of expertise to build such plants and manufacturing. And we have different laws here in the United States than they do in these other countries. So first of all, it takes time, so years. Second of all, it takes money. Companies, US-based companies or companies overseas that are going to try to move here, if they decide to do that, will have to put their money into it. If they put their money into building new manufacturing, guess what they're going to do? This is just economics 101, which we all had to take in college. They're going to raise the prices of the product because they had to invest money in creating new manufacturing plants. That's the first thing. Second thing, workers. The living wage in the United States is much higher, and I'll get into some of the countries that I'm talking about, than the countries where a lot of these products are either assembled or made or where the textiles and industry and ingredients come from. Much higher. So you're not going to be able to produce and manufacture many of these products at the cost, not the price, the cost that it's done in other countries. There is no way. And that makes sense. I mean, think about it. For you and your lifestyle, could you live on $10 a day? No. I mean, wages of $10 a day. Absolutely not. The United States is incredibly expensive. Think about Boston, for example, if you're familiar with the area. I mean, honestly, a six-figure salary, and there's been many studies that have shown this type of data, is what you need to afford to live comfortably in Boston. It's incredibly expensive. Rent's like $3,000 a month. So you don't have the manufacturing capacity, at least not yet, and it would take time to build and money to build. You don't have low wage labor because it doesn't exist here. And three, you don't have the expertise. Many of the things that are made take time and training to know how to make, especially when you're dealing with textiles and product development of some of these houses. That takes time, and that takes, again, investment. The last thing is the ingredients. We do not necessarily have all the components that it would take for some of these products. Even if you move all the manufacturing here, and even if you figure out, how to invest and create new manufacturing plants, or you use old plants somehow and retrofit them, and you figure out everything else, you're still going to have to import some things because we don't have everything in the world, or you're going to have to change the product itself. It's just that simple. The United States has become part of a global economy. So has practically every other country. That's the point of a global economy. Different pieces come from different parts of the world. Even things that are made in the United States that say made in the USA are not necessarily 100% made here. Some are, but some are assembled here, which means that the products are from various places. This happened during COVID when there were certain medical drugs and devices that, in order to treat patients, we had a problem getting them here in the United States because pieces of the, let's say, syringe or pump or whatever it is, are only made in Italy, for example. I'm just making this up. Okay, this is an example so you better understand what I'm talking about. It isn't made anywhere else, so you can't just suddenly make it here. You have to retrofit things or figure out how to use it takes time. You can do it, but it takes time, and that takes money. So those are things that you have to take into account when you're making those types of arguments. Again, it all goes back to money. So again, the price increases. As part of a global economy, these tariffs, when they go into place, the first 10% tariff, which was the base on everyone, every import, is 10%. There is some countries that were given much higher percentages of tariffs, and they already have existing duties on them from various countries. So, and I'll get into the specifics about like some of the ones that are very highly hit, which will hit the fashion and beauty industry. They then retaliate, which is why it's called a trade war, with the country that initiated the tariff, in this case, the United States. So China has already initiated a reciprocal tariff, which means that any products made in the United States, when they are sent to China, will be subject to a much higher tariff, which generally means that that country will not buy US goods. On top of that, there is a general feeling of unease and uncertainty because the United States is one of the biggest markets and buyers and sellers in the world. And the instability of not knowing whether or not nobody, at least at this point, there was a clarity around the fact that there was going to be tariffs, but at least according to news reports and general statements from various industries, they were not aware that these tariffs would be this high. So, and there's also discussion of whether or not the tariffs will then be rescinded. That uncertainty, that unease, is causing the markets to crash in the United States. And that uncertainty and unease will continue until we reach some level of stability. A trade war, if it actually ensues with countries like China and the EU and the UK and wherever else, would mean likely that other countries would buy less of US goods, which would mean that the US makes less money. So think of it as a friend group. Any of you are watching The White Lotus? There's a friend group in that particular show. I still haven't watched it yet, but I'm very well aware of the dynamic there. Think about your friend group, right? If you have a friend who is always like, oh yes, I'm going to book the tickets. I'm definitely going to book them, but never books them for everybody. Or says, I'm going to make the reservations. Don't worry. And then they forget to make the reservations. If it happens once, you're kind of like, oh, that's just Jen. She's silly, whatever. If it happens repeatedly, you stop depending on Jen to make the reservations or to book the tickets or whatever it is that you need her to do or him, because you're like, well, they're not reliable. That is a very simplified way of explaining how other countries are viewing, according to their news reports and their statements, the actions of the United States. They are saying that the US is not reliable or stable, and they feel like the best thing to do is to just not include the United States in their economic planning. That is, of course, very problematic to everyone, because the United States is a very large player in the global economy, which is why you hear about all this instability, which is why you hear this talk about recession, global economic impacts, etc. I am making it much simpler and, basic, because when you really get into all of this, like anything, it's incredibly complicated. And there's so many different factors that could happen over the next couple of months or years that will impact whatever is going to happen. But it is not, it would be naive, in my opinion, to say, oh, it's all going to be fine. It's just temporary and then we'll get through it. I think that's a very naive viewpoint. I think it's hopeful, and I with all due respect to all of you who think that hey, I really do hope for the best, plan for the worst. That's just how I think. I'm a lawyer by training, guys. That's what you get. I respect everyone's opinion, and I always welcome people's opinions on my channel and part of the discussion, because I think that's incredibly important. I think as a society, as a community, and here on my channel as part of the All Feisty community, I think it's important to value everyone's opinion and to discuss things, because I think when we do that, we get better. But I think it has been shown through long study of history, and of course what happened in 1930 with the Great Depression, and from many world-renowned economists that have talked about this issue, that this is a very risky proposition for the United States right now and for the global economy. So what does this mean for fashion? What does this mean for beauty? Why am I saying, well, it could be worse for that? Let me call these things out. There's a bunch of articles in the Business of Fashion, the Business of Beauty, that I think did a fantastic job, and I'll link to them down below. But one of the things they talked about is they said the baseline tariffs took effect on the 5th. Other tariffs will come into force on April 9th, right? So that's either here already if you're watching this, or is about to happen. The countries that he said, President Trump, that have unfair trade barriers on U.S. goods with new tariffs are Cambodia, which is 49%, Vietnam, 46%, Bangladesh, 37%, Thailand, 36%, China, 34%, Indonesia, 32%, Switzerland, 31%, Pakistan, 29%, India, 26%, Malaysia, 24%, and then, of course, the EU, which is encompasses quite a few at 20%. And so, in calling out those countries, Cambodia to the EU and these higher sourcing regions, the reason that's particularly problematic for fashion, for example, is that goods from Vietnam is the second biggest apparel exporter to the United States after China, for example. It's got a 46% tariff. Cambodia has a 49% duty, and Bangladesh has a 37%. China is subject to the new 34% tariff on top of the previously announced duties that we talked about. So many of the companies that moved away from China manufacturing to countries like Vietnam or Cambodia or Bangladesh are now in a situation where they moved from China to these other countries, and now they're going to have to figure that out. Whether or not it results in a rise in prices, it's still a massive change. And fashion, apparel, beauty have to take that into account when they figure out what they're doing next. There were already duties in place that Donald Trump had put on China, Mexico, and Canada. So it's going to, raise those costs even more. And since the U.S. is one of the world's, as I said, largest consumers for apparel and footwear, it's of great concern to the global market. When you look at fashion and beauty in particular, and clothing, the U.S. currently imports more than 98% of its clothing and 99% of shoes. Just let that sink in for a moment. 98% of clothing, 99% of shoes. Those are imported. And think back to what I said in the beginning of the video about all the factors that you have to take in place, even if you decide to do onshoring. That's what it's called, onshoring. So on your shores, on your property, on your land, right? So even if you can figure out a way to move all of that to the United States, time, money, workforce, knowledge, experience, just do the math. What you think will likely happen, costs are still going to go up. Now, if you look at this and you say, okay, well, we want to move manufacturing from those countries to the United States. Again, that's a fair goal. And the idea would be, okay, so you would put incentives in place for businesses to create manufacturing here. And there are some incentives in place to do that. You'd have to create more. You'd have to create funding for companies to do that in order for them not to pass that cost on to the consumers. And again, it's still going to take time. And fashion stocks, this is just, factual data. Fashion stocks plunged immediately. Lululemon, Nike, Ralph Lauren, they all just tanked. And you can just look those up yourself. The United States Fashion Industry Association said that we are deeply disappointed by the Trump administration's decision to impose new tariffs on all imports. This action will particularly affect American fashion brands and retailers. National Retail Federation came out with a statement that said, more tariffs equal more anxiety and uncertainty for American businesses and consumers. This is from David French, the Executive Vice President of Government Relations for NRF, which is what I used to do. That was my job. It's a very stressful job, by the way, guys. Now, like I said in the beginning, companies can choose to absorb some of these costs if they choose to do so. Bigger companies have an easier time doing this than small ones. Now, Walmart, for example, after the previous tariff announcements that Trump made, companies such as Walmart had announced their intent to negotiate with suppliers and ask them to cut costs, taking on the burden themselves. But the thing is, factories don't operate on huge margins, whatever you hear. They just don't. They're slim, and demands for price cuts just squeezes them even further than they're already squeezed. So, it starts from the makers of textiles to farmers to, people in labs. The supply chain is vast, and it's every single little piece of that that will be affected throughout the line. So now, what does this all mean, right? I tried to explain it in a way that was the least complicated that I could, but it is a complicated issue, and like I said before, there's a lot of different opinions on how this will go. What does that mean for all of you out there? Like, what do you do? What should you do? What I would say, and again, this is my opinion and my opinion only, although it is, I will say, shared by many people out there. I've read a lot of opinion pieces and talked to a lot of my former colleagues in DC. This will reverberate. This will definitely be an issue. In my opinion, it will not go away quickly. It will not be alleviated quickly. Even if the tariffs are rescinded or there are exceptions made to tariffs in this case, my opinion is that costs will definitely go up. I think quality will likely go down because if you're trying to look for cost cutting measures, that is one way to do it. I think the ultra luxury, ultra wealthy people will be fine and they will continue to purchase. And that aspect of it will just grow and they won't be particularly concerned. I think when you're talking about the high end consumer that is spending, for example, like the newest Louis Vuitton launch, where you could only buy it if you had spent, I think it was like $50,000 in the last year. Yeah, they're going to be fine. It's not going to really affect them. But the aspirational shopper absolutely is going to be affected because costs are going to go up across the board. So even if the tariffs are rescinded, and they're not, I don't think they're going to be, but let's say they are, other countries are less likely to be buying American goods for various reasons that I have outlined. So that means America in general is bringing in less money. Jobs are being cut. And the idea that there's suddenly going to be a boom in manufacturing, I think, again, I hope I'm wrong, but I think it's a naive thought because manufacturing in places like Massachusetts, they were booming industries here in this country. And the idea of bringing them back is a lovely idea, and it's a positive idea, and I think it's important because of that history and that expertise has been lost, and I do think that's sad. But it's not a simple endeavor. It's a very expensive, very time-consuming endeavor that someone is going to have to pay for to do. If it does happen, I think that's fabulous. But I don't think it alleviates the cost issue, the price issue. And again, if consumers have less money in their pockets because the global economy has been hurt, the US economy has been hurt, your 401ks have been cut in half, and you're buying less, which means less tax revenue overall, where's the money going to come from to create these new manufacturing centers? The only place it will come from is the government. The administration would have to put those things in place. I have not seen any plans to do that as of yet. Again, not saying it's impossible. I'm just saying all of this is far more complicated and difficult than just saying it will bring manufacturing back to the US. So I would encourage folks who are interested in products that come from overseas, which is practically everything in the United States, to buy those products now if you're planning on buying them anyway. Say for the Sephora sale, where things are 20% off if you're Rouge and they're made in Italy, yes, I would buy them now. I plan to do that. I plan to stock up on some things that I use all the time because I use them all the time, skincare, that type of thing. I plan on things that I can keep, things that will store. Yes, I do plan on buying them now. Clothing and shoes and bags, yes, I absolutely do think they're going to be more expensive. Again, these are just my thoughts, but you've all asked for them, so I'm going to share. I plan on not buying them. I am in a very enviable position, though. I am very lucky. I have an enormous closets. I've been purchasing things for 30 years, so I don't need anything. I don't need any clothes. I don't need any shoes. I don't need any bags. I mean, literally, I do not. But yeah, my plan is not to purchase this year. I won't be buying bags. I won't be buying shoes. I won't be buying clothes because I tend to buy very high end luxury items and I keep them forever, literally. But I don't expect to purchase them this year. I think unless I go overseas physically to buy them, yes, I will not be buying them in the United States. That's a decision for all of you to make, but I think that's the reality of where we are. So I welcome all of your thoughts. I know this is going to be a controversial video, but that's okay. Like I said in the beginning, I welcome discussion, I welcome opinions, and I look forward to all of your thoughts. So thanks so much for joining me today, guys. Really do appreciate it. And I hope to see you in another video really soon.